Now that we've built out our lovely map of the Darklands with the races from Total War Warhammer games 1 and 2, it's time to get to the real meat and potatoes of the Darklands. The real reason you've all come to this overhyped thumbnail and big bold letters, these suspected races of Total War Warhammer 3. So we've got our finalized map from our last video, and if you haven't seen that, it'll be linked at the end of this one. Don't you dare worry. I'd never pass up a chance to market myself. But right now it's a little scarce, with not much in the center and the right sides of the map, but don't worry, that's going to get filled up right quick. In today's video, we're going to talk about my 4 big contenders for the upcoming factions of Total War Warhammer 3, as well as their placements on this map. The Ogre Kindoms, Kislev, Demons of Chaos, and lastly, the Chaos Dwarfs. And we'll get started in kind of that order. We'll do Ogre Kingdoms, Kislev, the Chaos Dwarfs, and save the Demons of Chaos for last, because I think the Demons of Chaos are going to be kind of a temperamental faction, and they'll be probably the smallest of the 4. But before we jump into the Ogre Kingdoms, I want to talk about 2 maps by Lord Solar Mock that have been brought to my attention. He spent a lot of time on these and has gone so far as to even name what he thinks every settlement will be on the map. I'm going to showcase those real quick here, but I'll even provide a link to both maps as well, because these are definitely incredible and back up a lot of what we've been talking about, in addition to raising a lot of great ideas. So the second one is really kind of the same map that we're working on here, only like Total Warified, so enjoy those. But without further ado, let's do it. So the Ogre Kingdoms are pretty, well, huge, as you would guess, what with their bodies being gigantic bags of meat and cannibalism. But if we take a look at the format of Total War Warhammer 2, we can hopefully expect 4 races, as this kind of fits the norm for their standard release pattern, and 2 legendary lords. So the big 2 to start out here are Greasus Goldtooth and Golgfag Maneater. And there will be independent videos for those 2 if you guys would like to know more about their lore, but Greasus Goldtooth is my vote for the kind of de facto leader of the Ogre Kingdoms. He fits that role as is the tabletop, as Greasus is the kind of over-tyrant. His tribe, his kingdom, his clan, whatever you want to call it, is the richest and most powerful in the Mountains of Morn. He would be positioned centrally in the mountains, making for a great easy or even kind of normal difficulty start for the campaign. Surrounded by other tribes and few enemies, it'll be a great way to ally and build diplomatic momentum while you make a bulbous army of thundering ogres. And it's a great location because you have the Ivory Road to the east and a lot of potential for run-ins with potential Skaven and the such, so I think it's a really strong location. Now, Golgfag Maneater, I can just hear YouTube demonetizing me from here, is our other legendary lord. And he's going to be a bit different. For one, he could start all the way on the other mountains to the west, the World's Edge Mountains, as he has a long-standing feud with Ungrim Ironfist. So this could play heavily into that bit of lore. Also, he is a man-eater. By that same nature, he kind of is always wandering through the world, going on ridiculous ogre fat adventures. It's kind of an odd thing. We'll talk about man-eaters when we talk about Ogre Kingdoms, but this would be a harder start for the Ogre Kingdoms because they're going to have less natural allies in the region and are surrounded by dwarfs, greenskins, and Skaven, as we know from our map previously built out. And this could kind of be your hard option for the campaign. One thing worth mentioning is Golgfag's mercenary status. So this might play heavily into a possible Dogs of War release in, say, Total War Warhammer 2, or even if they hold it off for the Game 3. And maybe he has some form of interesting mechanic wherein his units have maybe lower initial cost and a higher upkeep as their mercenaries, or just something with a nod to that. We've already seen with the Tomb Kings that Creative Assembly is no stranger to tampering with the ways that recruitment costs and upkeep costs work to fit the flavor of armies. If Golgfag is his own faction, like we've seen in Total War Warhammer 2, then this could simply be easy without not too much insanity behind it. I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, I don't know what the hell goes on there, but maybe that kind of ties into it. But outside of those 2 as the biggest options for the Ogre Kingdom's kind of starting legendary lords, we have some of the other lords to consider as either possible DLC lords or, even candidates for DLC packs or FLC packs, what have you. But Golgfag, I think, is the most interesting, throws us to an entirely different portion of the map, but there's plenty of other options here, like I was saying. And the prophet of the Great Maw, that we've already talked about in our video, Scrag the Slaughterer, has a similar lore to Katep, this exiled wanderer that goes from region to region. And in our video on him, we discussed his potential awesome mechanics with his giant meat pot and his bonuses that it can give to the rest of the army. God, just saying the word meat pot feels dirty. But he's a great candidate for that reason alone. Vastly different mechanics to what we've already used in the game. And it seems with each new race, we're getting something that breaks the mold or makes them truly unique. You know, be it Tomb King's item crafting, Dark Elves, slavery mechanic, etc. And methinks we'll get something along the lines of a food mechanic for the Ogre Kingdoms, but that's neither here nor there. One thing is for certain, Scrag would definitely give bonuses to, in some way or another, to Gorgers. And we've got Gark Ironskin. He leads the Ironskin tribe that would give us access to a more cavalry-centric lord via Rhinoxes and maybe even Mournfangs. Also, Gark would have the closest ties with the Chaos Dwarfs of any other kingdom, so it would be interesting to place them so close to the Dawizar that they have them as natural allies with Chaos, Skaven, and Greenskins to their east and north. And we'll talk more about that relationship as we kind of progress forward here, but it's definitely worth noting about. Lastly, we have Bro Slave Lord. It's another solid option as he has these kind of, chains, I guess you could say, that he uses to keep undead ghosts and skeletons bound to his will. He's showcased in some of the earlier editions. At 6th edition, I think, is the first one he's in, because it's the first Ogre Kingdom one. And I think they dropped him in 7th, or I know they dropped him in 8th, but I can't remember if they dropped him in 7th or 8th edition. But he's definitely a really cool model, and it's definitely very different from the way that you could typically picture an Ogre Kingdom Lord. I thought of maybe saying, oh, maybe we could have him as a hybrid faction like Ark and the Black's faction, but he just has these things like shackled to his chains, and they don't have units or access to necromantic powers or anything like that. So let's recap on our map here. We have Greasus smack dab in the middle of the Mountains of Morn, while Goldfag with Goldfag right far on the west. And we'll place a potential starting location for Gark, as we know where the Ironskin tribe is located. But both Brau, B-R-A-U-H, and Scrag would be wild cards as far as their placement goes, as they are a bit more of the wandering variety, but this is it. Now, there are locations we can place for other NPC ogre tribes, so we'll kind of fill those in here as well. But as a smaller scale, this is the start to our Game 3 races. And let's start in as well. I mean, now that we've done our Ogre Kingdoms, let's jump into the next faction, Kislev. Our Slavic representation in the Warhammer world is pretty cut and dry, but we're going to talk about more than just Kislev, but rather the entirety of the human representation in the Darklands. And a lot of you were asking me in the last video, where's the Empire? Well, since both have such small representations in the Darklands actual, I wanted to keep things together for ease of understanding. And before we get into the goodies of their placement, we have to deal with one of the biggest issues of Kislev: their timeline and how their legendary lords would work. So back in the 6th edition of the game, Kislev actually had an army book of sorts. The Allied Contingent is what it's called, and it gives us all the goodies we need to speculate on possible units coming up and what have you. I mean, they even talk about the gods, of course, their lore of magic, and they talk about pretty much everything related to a Kislev army. Don't worry, we'll definitely be getting into that in depth. Don't you dare worry, it's on the back burner. But the two named characters laid out are Boris Ursus and his daughter Katarine. Now, Boris, in the time of the 6th edition, is the Tsar of Kislev, and he dies 15 years after the coronation of Emperor Karl Franz. And upon his death, rulership transfers over to Katarine, the new Tsarina of Kislev. Now, if you've played the campaign, then you know, in Total War Warhammer 1, you know that Katarine is indeed the Tsarina of Kislev already. Boris does not exist. Also, the Empire campaign starts roughly right after the coronation of Karl Franz, so that's IC 2502, 2508, around there kind of area. And for those keeping track, that is. But CA will probably just undo this or outright ignore it. I mean, after all, Azog the Slaughterer dies, around 2508, which is slightly after Franz's coronation, but before the death of Boris Ursus. So A lot of these dates are kind of hearsay from conflicting sources and editions. So that's kind of my grand disclaimer here. You know, take that, the previous nugget with a little bit of salt there. There's a grain of salt. Don't get salty about it. Just take it with a grain of salt. You guys get it. So there's some assumptions we can draw from these facts. 1, Boris is dead and Katerina's queen. Or 2, Boris isn't dead and Katerina is a princess. Or 3, the third assumption, the biggest one, the one I want to stick with. Boris abdicated the throne and resumed his responsibilities as the high priest of Ursun, giving Katerina the title of Tsarina. Now, just a quick aside, Ursun is the patron god of Kislev. He's essentially the god of bears, strength, Stoli vodka, potato grain alcohol, and just vodka as a whole, as well as winged hussars. I mean, like, not really, but the first two were true. The first two are true. Gods and bears and strength. Gods, bears, whatever. But this then leaves Kislev in a really great position for starting locations for our map. And that's key, because otherwise we just see Kislev in, well, Kislev. And on the other end of the World's Edge Mountains, there are Kislevite colonies that were introduced in some of the Warhammer Fantasy supplements, namely Something Rotten in Kislev. Those Brits and their puns on Shakespeare. But there they kind of see a series of colonies just outside of High Pass, the region we talked about that has dwarfs on it. And this would bring Kislev into the Darklands actual, rather than just simply right by the Empire. And these are sometimes referred to as the Far Side colonies, or Zaborata. The most prominent colony being Chernozavata, or the I'm sorry, that's Chernozavatra, not Ta. And this is in the Wheat Lands. In one part of the history, the entire population is actually killed off, like entirely, by a plague, and then reanimated by a necromancer. So they've got that going for them. And maybe this island would kind of start with a rogue vampire count's army, something fun like that, but it has bounced back and forth between Kislev hands in the history of Kislev. But now that we've laid down some groundwork here, let's go into how this would look on our map. And we can just keep the Tsarina Katerina back in Kislev. Everything we see in Total War Warhammer 1 and 2 would be just fine, if not maybe a little more north. Rather than making them on that map, we'll just talk about Kislev in the Darklands, since that's the focus of this video. You just assume that if Kislev in Kislev as is where they would be in Total War Warhammer 3. And just because I can't extend this map magically. But you can see from where Kislev is in relation to these colonies from a lot of the maps we've already shared. And you get a good sense of, hey, it's just on the other end of the mountains here. And Katerina would rule from Kislev, the Kislev capital, or maybe a fractured Kislev that's dealing with Kurgan invasions, as we discussed in the Kurgan section in our last video. And Katerina would definitely be your caster-based lord, as she focuses primarily on the lore of ice, and maybe we'd see her giving passive bonuses to morale, leadership, and infantry lines. So a very basic and easy to manage lord, or lady rather. Then the main cities would then be beset by Empire, Chaos, Greenskins, and Vampire counts in the south. So they'd have a lot of good natural enemies, and they'd be in a pretty good solid starting location. But if we look at Boris Ursa, the Forever Tsar as he is known, we know that he built this gigantic fortress monastery on top of the Ice Mountain, and in veneration to the Great Spirit Bear. And this is my proposed starting location for Kislev's secondary faction. Call them Sons of Ursa, led by Boris, and have him coming out of the mountains to reclaim some of the lost Kislevite colonies, as well as opening up the High Pass to increase trade into Kislev proper and the remainder of the Old World. This would pose a lot of interesting challenges for Boris too. It'd definitely be kind of like a hard difficulty faction or campaign, as he would be more or less isolated from the rest of the parent faction, surrounded by dwarfs, maybe natural allies, who knows on that front, Skaven, Greenskins, Vampire counts, and maybe even ogres, depending on the distance to Goldfag. Then that, big boy himself, Boris, is going to be thundering through the lands on his lumbering war bear, just drunk and talking about weapons-grade plutonium. And his passives might lend itself more to an anti-monster role, as he careens through the mountains like a toboggan without brakes, slaying things in the name of the bear god. And there's a lot of really cool stuff with the Sons of Ursus, or with the Kislevite bear cavalry in and of itself. They are actually even talked about as an Empire Knightly Order, and less of like a Kislev separate special unit or unique unit. And in the Allied Contingent, it's very clear that it's separate. So it's very interesting to see that in the 8th edition it talks about, hey, like, well, you know, maybe there's an Empire or a faction of Empire Knightly Orders that is riding on bears from Kislev. It's like, nah, dude, those are Kislevite war bears, not Empire. So the history of Kislev has been very interesting in that they've been separate and then not separate, separate and then not separate. And with the end of 8th edition, they were just kind of completely smashed into the ground in the end times. So this is the CA's chance to really make for a true separate Kislev faction that has got really good representation, really good, amazing separate units that aren't just simply reskinned Empire units. And I'm really excited to see what they do here. But there is a possible third option here, and at the very least, he's a candidate for DLC, Tordmir Lubovoisen. And I'm sorry, I'm not Polish or Russian enough to understand how to pronounce that. I can just say, you know, Davai Breton. And he's the master of the Griffin Legion, which is basically a cavalry force that you could see maybe escorting caravans to and from the Silk and Ivory Road near the River Ruin that runs into Cathay. And he'd almost be like an Alberic type character for Kislev, and another way to get the faction deeper into the Darklands in a lore-friendly way. And the lore in this is pretty scant, and mainly conjecture on my part, but I'd like to really see a third option here that is way out of the norm and puts them in an element that is removed from the status quo of the rest of the faction. Maybe Tordmir gets some glorious passive bonus to ambushing and fast attack cav or harassment units, as this is kind of his primary unit, and that's kind of falls in line with the winged hussar looking units of the Kislev roster are part of their fast cav. So they're like shock cav, their bear cavalry is that action there. But there's also, again, a fourth option that I want to at least just touch on because I loved Gotrek and Felix so much, but that's Boyarina Ulrika Magdova Stregov. And she's cool in that she's A boyarina, so that's a female boyar, and B, gets turned into a Lamian vampire, leading Ungol undead all throughout the lands. And she kind of flies the banner of Kislev, because she still has loyalty to Kislev. She still has that independence. She's not some vampire thrall. So maybe this could be a really cool dual faction in the vein of Ark and the Black's Followers of Nagash, where she has some vampire council units and some Kislev units. She actually abandons the Silver Pinnacle, you know, where all the Lamian vampires are, and forsakes the other vampires. And we don't really even see her again until the end times, where she leads a combined army of men and undead from her father's lands, while riding a, you guessed it, black coach with the flag of Kislev flapping in the wind. And the cool thing too is like Vlad is like, hey, why don't you come and do this with us? So Vlad von Karstein, who helps out the Empire, brings her with him. So you can kind of see that mechanic of, oh, hey, I can help out Kislev, I can help out my home nation, I'll do it. But I mean, shit, she even had a model, albeit she was human in that model, but with her just all sorts of Bolshevik out winter attire, but a model nonetheless. So let's recap here, as we've done quite a bit for Kislev. Kislev is probably the most in-depth of our factions here, and I apologize for each one of these sections being so dense, but without any previous context, I want to make sure you guys understand my placement, and not just me sliding in with oh, yeah, it'll go there. Again, okay, recap. So, Katarine would absolutely go on the map, and we know already with Kislev being Kislev, so that's kind of away and out off of this map here. So, just picture that where Kislev already is in your Total War map. But let's take a look at where the Ice Mountain would appear on this map. And you'd find it somewhere a little south of High Pass, nestled where the Dwarfs, Chaos, and Skaven have already taken up a ton of residence. So a lot of competition there. Then we have the Griffin Legion starting possibly all the way down here by the River of Ruin by the Silk Road we discussed. Well, I think that just having the factions split by the World's Edge Mountains would provide enough diversity in their playstyle. I really enjoy the idea of a really far-flung human settlement, which brings up Pig Barter. And a lot of you have mentioned this in the comment section, but Pig Barter is the colony that is inhabited by ogres, by humans, by hobgoblins, everyone. And this would be a great starting location for the Griffin Legion, or at least right by this, and maybe a nondescript Kislev fort. And this gives us our connection to the Empire colonies and Kislev that we've so dearly wanted. And just imagine, guys, pig jousting, greasing up your favorite bovine and having at it with your closest mate with a wooden dowel. The opportunities are endless. Oh god. But since we're in the area, let's move a little north now and talk about another fan favorite, the Dawi Tsar. Now, we've already really sort of broken the seal on the Dwarfs on the channel already, but we haven't talked about how wide-sweeping their empire is. Really, when you look at a map of the Darklands, you see a large, open expanse surrounded by the World's Edge Mountains and the Mountains of Morn. The Chaos Dwarf Empire is really that entire central to northern block of the open area, with the Tsar Nagrund in the furthest north to the Black Fortress and the Tower of Gorgoth in the southernmost reaches of the Empire. And the Chaos Dwarfs have a lot of possible locations here and an actual pretty rich history of possible lords. I mean, there's a lot of places these guys could be up and down this map. But Tsar Nagrund is going to be our first stop on this adventure, though, as it is easily the most important and prolific site in the kingdom of the Dawi Tsar. And I'm really excited for a possible reveal of this race, because they're really incredible from their kind of basic dwarf similarities to their ancient Babylonian influences, from Hashut, their patron god, the Lamassu, the bull centaurs, the Tauret, the great Taurus. So they have a lot of really cool kind of things going for them. And the Tower of Tsar Nagrund not only acts as the seat of power for the Chaos Dwarfs, but a spiritual epicenter as well. You know, the Temple of Hashut sitting atop the massive tower, this kind of a bull head leering down at the populace, and that sounds scary as shit. But this lends us to talk about Astra Goth Iron Hand, the Chaos Dwarf in power armor, effectively. And this is a no-brainer for one of the starting lords of the Dwarfs. He is, I guess, what you call a demon smith. They have a bunch of different names throughout the ages. Chaos Dwarf Sorcerer, Hell Smith. We're just going to go with Demon Smith. I like the sound of that one. And this is both the spiritual and almost, I guess, runesmith cast of the Chaos Dwarfs, so definitely the kind of artificiers. And magic is a really kind of fickle beast in the Chaos Dwarf lore. Sure, they get access to it. You know, they have the fire. They have, I believe it's the lore of death as well as lore of Hashut. But the big thing, quote unquote, with the dwarfs was always that they were immune to the winds and whims of magic. You know, that's what made them kind of magically inept and had a natural resistance to magic. The Chaos Dwarfs, though, are corrupted by Hashut, a demon, effectively, a minor god. And as a result of using magic, it slowly turns them to stone over time. And we've kind of discussed that in the past. And the same has happened here with Astra Goth. His body is kind of slowly turning to stone, as he is the oldest living demon smith in Tsar Nagrund. And his legs and arms are just completely rock. So he gets around on this kind of steampunk mechanized armor that allows him to, I guess, forego the use of his depleted body. And he's definitely a very different lord than what we've seen. And Game 3 is really going to hopefully break the mold, like we've kind of said before, with a lot of cool eclectic lords, and I'm really excited for that. You know, it's exciting to get a whole new bevy of lords, but it's more exciting to get a whole new different type of lord, a whole new different approach to the legendary lord that has kind of put Total War Warhammer on the quote-unquote map. And we might even see that transition into Three Kingdoms or further on to further Total War the series. So it's been a fun ride so far. So Astra Goth would obviously be your caster lord. He kind of centered around maybe a hybrid build, the lore of Hashut, and perhaps buffs to spiritual buildings, income buildings, or just maybe construction as a whole. And I definitely see him filling that route as the ultimate ruler of the Dawi Tsar. Considering his closeness to the mountains, we can expect him to square off with a possible greenskin presence, some Skaven, maybe rogue hobgoblin armies, and a possible alliance with the Ironskin tribe of ogres in the northeast. Needless to say, we're looking at something a little more entry-level here with the other Chaos Dwarfs surrounding Tsar Nagrund, or maybe even an immediate presence in the area without NPC factions. Like, I'm not sure if you start as Astra Goth and it's like, okay, hey, you can have almost the entire of the plane of Tsar. So it'd be interesting to see how they're going to do this. And there's a lot of different options, as you guys have really seen, for the other lords to have for the other races to have all this presence of NPC factions or variations of their faction, just like we get with Bretonnia or Empire, stuff like that, kind of easy confederatable targets. And I say this because there are a number of other dwarf strongholds out in the Darklands, and each one will probably get its own associated faction. The Tower of Gorgoth, the Gates of Zar, which is an important kind of trading outpost. But the most important stronghold is the Black Fortress, the home of our second lord, Drazhoath Drazhoath, it's kind of a weird name, the Ashen. Like Astra Goth, came to us in a in the Tamarcon with a whole brand new set of rules and an incredible model. Like, I mean, guys, the Chaos Dwarfs in general have a really cool line. I mean, dwarfs on top of Lamasus or raging Taurus mounts, so rad, so different. I mean, bull centaurs are like half dwarf, half centaur. Wait, does that mean they've got like a third man in there? Man, what was on the penis? I mean, what? But so rad, so different. And Chaos Dwarfs fill all the gaps that the dwarf roster naturally has, right? So monstrous infantry, cavalry, basic chaff units in their hobgoblins. So there's a lot of fun to be had. And Drazhoath the Ashen is really a rad lord, and I think he's a shoe-in for a second starting location. Now, Astra Goth went and banished Drazhoath to the Black Fortress many years ago. And it's something like 1,000 years ago, when both of them were kind of fledgling demon smiths. And the Black Fortress has sort of become synonymous with exiles, housing some of the rejects of the great Game of Thrones that is the political landscape of Tsar Nagrund. You know, when you play the Game of Thrones, one person is a cabbage-smelling dwarf barstool. I mean, wait, what? Either way, the Black Fortress is one of the first bastions against any invader into the dwarf lands from the east, or the Chaos Dwarf lands, and the primary target as it kind of sits close to the Silk Road. So Drazhoath would command the Legion of Asgore, a secondary faction of Chaos Dwarfs. So we can see that this time around, it's easy for us to drum up the possible second factions that these lords would fall under. I mean, I would never have guessed Lore Masters of Hoeth as a faction for Teclis. Never would have seen that coming. But this time around, I can actually kind of see, oh, it would make sense for the Legion of Asgore to be led by Drazhoath or something like that. But again, you know, kind of surrounded on all sides. Drazhoath's campaign would be far more challenging, with a bonus maybe to hobgoblin slaves, or maybe even raiding/sacking cities. The big difference here is that the closest Chaos Dwarf ally would be the Tower of Gorgoth, far to the west. So we'd have ogres coming from the hills to the east, greenskins and Skaven all around, and maybe even beastmen depending on their placement on this map. And there are, speaking of this, there are actually two other lord options. Zatan the Black, who I believe I think he's dead and gone in the lore at this point, kind of superseded by Astra Goth. And there's the other one, who is Gorda's Backstabber. Gorda's is interesting in that he's a hobgoblin chieftain. In fact, he's the only lord-level hobgoblin chieftain ever released by Games Workshop. So he has got a lot going for him. You know, from the a little bit different from the standard Chaos Dwarf roster lineup, at least. And he inherently is a very sneaky and cunning dude, much like a Skarsnik. So, well, I don't think the latter two are concrete options, you know, Zatan and Gordas. I think they are definitely cool and kind of worth bringing up. You know, I don't want to kind of leave them in the dust and have someone say, hey, what about these two? So they definitely need their kind of limelight. But let's head back to our grand map here, right? And fill it out with even more cute little faction flags, like a little cocktail flag. So again, the most obvious placement here is the Tower of Tsar Nagrund in the Plain of Zar, one of the biggest focal points of the Darklands map and the capital of the Chaos Dwarf Empire. It'd almost be interesting to see a subjugation portion of the campaign, you know, kind of like how Empire does, you know, but at the same time, I kind of fucking hate that because I always get ambushed and I lose my cool starting units right off the bat. So maybe no subjugation, maybe screw that idea. I was just riffing hard. I don't appreciate it. Whatever. I'm not bitter. You guys are. Our other starting area would be the Black Fortress, further to the southeast. Now, comparing the rest of the map, we can see that Drazhoath might have a lot of trouble with the Skaven, Beastmen, Wood Elves, and High Elves of the region, but I think it would be a lot of fun regardless. And we'll add some more little symbols here for other dwarfs in the region before moving on over to our last of our mighty four races. And again, this one will be very much a different one, but the Chaos Demons. So placement on this map is going to be a little hard. borderline goddamn near impossible. One of the biggest things about Chaos Demons, and arguably what made them so powerful on the tabletop, is their ability to pop up wherever they want on the battlefield. It used to make playing against them so damn annoying that you'd have a brain aneurysm halfway before the first turn ended. Unless you were the High Elves, like me, and took the Banner of the World Dragon and just dumpstered them. But that's neither here nor there. So what we're going to do, rather than talk about a supposed starting location for these four, we're going to talk about which lords I think will be in Game 3 as per each respective patron god. Again, this will be a bit of a briefer of a section, as there's no elaborate backstory for each location to go into. And with that being said, I'd love to hear your guys' theories on where some of these named demons would start on the map. I mean, we'll speculate as to, okay, maybe this is there, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. It's really kind of up in the air right now. So we'll start with Khorne, because he actually has a possible location on this map. Just south of Greasus Goldtooth's camp, it's just simply called Skarbrand. And Skarbrand is the name of one of the greatest bloodthirsters of Khorne to have ever existed. He's been all up in the Warhammer and the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Actually, a quick aside on that. Almost all of these demons are cross-referenced. Like Be'lakor is in both 40k and fantasy. Inkari, Skarbrand, Karos, Fateweaver, all of them are pretty much in both. But again, it's back on track. So in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and is probably one of the most favorite bloodthirsters my favorite bloodthirsters in the lore. Also one of Khorne's favorite bloodthirsters. Let alone, he's got a great model. He's one of the most beautiful models. When they updated all the bloodthirsters, he got a new model, and it's just the cat's pajamas. It's the Khorne's pajamas. And there's a lot of appearances of him throughout the lore, and maybe we'll have him, I don't know, placed simply right below Greasus Goldtooth. I'm not sure. But I'd love to see Khorne bloodletters kind of squaring off against those giant meat bags. And Skarbrand himself has this kind of loose alliance with, say, the Skaven. He always has these moving alliances of opportunity, whatever allows him to spill the most blood and capture the most skulls to the Skull Throne. And there's a point where he assists Thanquol in besieging Karak Enkul, and somewhat indirectly. There's a titanic clash where the master engineer Clarak Bronzehammer brings an axe of Valaya. Just think of a large stone axe statue. That's the best way to describe it. But it brings it down on Skarbrand's head, killing him. And he kind of whispers before he dies to Thanquol, like, hey, if you ever need me again, holla at me, yo. So it's like, whoa, what's going on there? But demons don't die. They just wait and come back from the nether, kind of gaining power to materialize in the human world once more. But our next lord will depend on how they do the factions. Is everything just going to be lumped together with four lords? Are we just going to see all the demons as one super faction? Will they pair up, say, Khorne and Nurgle and Slaanesh and Tzeentch? Khorne and Slaanesh don't get along, and Nurgle and Tzeentch hate each other. So who's to say? But let's just kind of keep talking about the lords to make it easier on us. I think we'll kind of get lost down a rabbit hole if we go down talking about every point of speculation, much like I'm doing right now. But so, let's talk about Tzeentch, because I couldn't decide between the Changeling or Kairos Fateweaver, but I landed on Kairos Fateweaver because he's similar to Sarthoriel, but he has a second head and is far more well known of a character in the roster of Tzeentch. In fact, Sarthoriel does not exist in the tabletop. Well, not in the breadth that Kairos does. So Kairos is very unique because he has peered into the well of eternity. And this limitless font of energy at the heart of the impossible fortress deep in the northern chaos wastes kind of gives you as much knowledge as you see fit, or you want to contain within your somewhat warped brain. And from there, he has kind of gleaned every single spell in existence. And this would, of course, lead to a really cool mechanic behind that little lore tidbit. So check this out. He has two heads, right? Well, each head knows a total of 4 spells from various lores. His left head chooses from life, metal, light, and heavens. And his right head chooses from death, beasts, shadow, and fire. But both heads know all the lores from the lore of Tzeentch. So that's kind of awesome. This guy's a casting powerhouse. I'd argue he's going to be the best caster in the game with access to as many spells as possible. But quick counterpoint, quick devil's advocate here. That was kind of supposed to be the same way with Mazdamundi and with Teclis, and they ended up just kind of giving them a custom kit of spells. So I don't know how they would do Kairos, because in the tabletop, you choose the spells before the game starts, and you choose every turn you choose which head is going to be the one that's going to be casting. So you can kind of go really hog wild in his custom kit of 8 spells plus all the other ones from his Lore of Tzeentch. So you have a pretty fucking powerful caster here. I mean, sure, Sartoriel is pretty scary, but this guy is even scarier. I mean, he has 2 disgusting beaked heads, and I hate birds. So, triple threat. Speaking of triple threats, let's skirt on over to Nurgle, because he's definitely a triple threat. He's ugly, and ugly. So, Epidemius is the disgusting little maggot king. He's considered one of Nurgle's chosen tallymen, and one of the 7 protectors of pestilence. So, just this disgusting creature of grand significance to Father Nurgle here. Ooh. And he has a lot of insane mechanics where he has the ability to buff every single demon of Nurgle on the battlefield, increasing their strength, their toughness, or even adding like killing blow to them. So maybe this would correlate to adding melee defense or melee attack ability. Weapon strength ability, or just outright giving them anti-infantry or AP, or however they want to. They have translated Killing Blow to AP and anti-infantry in the past, so maybe that mechanic popping into all the demons across the battlefield. Maybe that's just the red line of buffs for him as a campaign mechanic. So I'd love to see how they do Epidemius, because he is so integral to the overall arcing lore of Nurgle. So I think him as a legendary lord would not only be unique, but a great way to get us started on the road of pestilence that is Papa Nurgle. And our last god, Slaanesh, is going to be something with 7 boobs and the sexual appetite of an overactive 17-year-old boy. Okay, maybe not really, but I'm not that far off. The Mask of Slaanesh is this just absolutely horrifying demon of Slaanesh, and we'll definitely be doing her justice in our own video on each one of these lords. But she's essentially like a D&D version of like an anti-bard. Bards use their spells and their song and dance to buff people. To put it simply, she has these kind of dances, and the dance of dreaming, flesh spasm polka, and waltz of lethargy. Each one of these incurs penalties to leadership for dreaming, strength for flesh spasm, and I guess you could be translated to, it's called initiative, but I guess you could translate that to attack speed, to each one of these dances respectively. So she's, again, very different and really diverse in a way that's not entirely out of the norms of Total War Warhammer, but adds a nice fresh approach to the game. And I really am excited to see how they do these Chaos Demons, because each one of them kind of turns everything on their head. One of the things to mention with all of these characters is that they're demons, and demons have insane ward saves in the tabletop, like very high. I think Mask of Slaanesh has a 3-up ward save. If you understand what that means from tabletop, you understand how strong that is. So we can expect these to be naturally very hard to kill, causing fear and all manner of terrifying demon stuff. So that concludes our demons. Again, we don't really have a place for them on the map, so I'll just drop them on here because I'm a completionist, and I'd feel like this wasn't done if there weren't any, they weren't kind of given proper placement on the map. And a lot of this is going to depend on how far north they go. There's a lot of places we could see demons placed on a Northern Chaos Wastes map, but again, this is really going to depend, and since this video is on Darklands, we can't go too far off the beaten path. But that's it, guys. We finally squared away our final map for the Darklands. We can see each and every race represented across the would-be campaign map, and this has been really a fun map to build out for you guys, and an incredibly fun video to do. Once more, huge shout out to WeaponMaster470 on Reddit for a lot of the information on this. Thank you so much, man. This has been a great time. And as always, guys, feel free to comment and let me know what you think some of these lords would be placed. I'd love to speculate back and forth on the placement or even possible configuration of the Chaos Demon faction. Huge quick aside, because I know this is going to get brought up. I was going to talk about Enkari, but I wanted just to kind of stick to the 4 lords. I think that we'll absolutely see him, her, it thing as a Slaanesh demon lord, because he's teased so much in the ending cinematic of Total War Warhammer 2, but I'm just not sure in what capacity. Besides, I mean, It seems so easy to talk about him, so I wanted to give you guys another Slaanesh demon to drool over. Multiple boobs and all. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please go ahead and like the video, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, on that note, actually, if you haven't, please press the little bell icon next to subscribe. It basically turns on notifications. If you don't want that, don't turn it on, but if you do, turn it on. I just read that YouTube's updated their algorithm and how it will notify, it actually won't notify around 60% of your subscribers. That sucks. So unless you or all of them have the little bell pressed, whatever portion doesn't, so let's say I've got 12,000 subs and 4,000 of you guys have it already clicked, the other 8,000, 60% of that number probably won't ever see these notifications. So if you want to stay up to date on my lore videos, ring that bell. Either way, have a good one and take care.